you 3D modeling and such. Uh, so uh, yeah, what are your names? And oh, one second.
My name is Amir.
My name is Mariam.
My camera is not working right now, so it's yeah. Uh, we'll wait a few moments for some people to join, but this this is going to be a 5-part course. Going to cover a lot of like the basics and then some of the more advanced parts of like 3D and 3D modeling and how to make animations, videos, and pictures.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I think I'll start with the presentation. People can rewatch this. So, welcome. This is Intro to 3D Modeling, and there's going to be some more advanced stuff later on. This is the first part of the course. So, in this, we're going to be using a couple of different software. So, Blender is is the main thing we're going to be using. It's completely free and open source 3D modeling and animation program. You can use it to make all kinds of videos, renders, movies even, and it's pretty powerful. So that's what we're going to be using. So you might be wondering, like, what is modeling? What is basics? How does this work? So when you want to make something in 3D, it's all good. When you want to make something in 2D, you make it out of shapes, like basic shapes. So all shapes except for like a circle is made out of vertices. And the lines between those are edges. And then when you color things in, you get faces. So those are the main parts of any shape. In 3D, you add another dimension to that. So in 2D, while all of your vertices, their location is an X and Y coordinate. In 3D, you get 3 dimensions. So yeah, in 2D, you have 2 dimensions for everything. You define everything with just vertices, edges, and faces, and you have 2 coordinates. But in 3D, you have 3 sets of coordinates. And then in 3D, you also have this thing called ray tracing and path tracing, and this is what makes 3D so much more realistic than 2D. When you're making any kind of picture, for example, in real life, light reflects off of objects and into your eyes, and what you end up seeing, some areas have more light, others have less, and that ends up giving you this shaded image that your eyes actually see. So in 3D, you can actually sort of simulate that, and that's one of those big things that makes it so realistic. And this is all done through math. Yeah. So modeling is the process of just taking basic shapes and essentially adding more vertices, adding more depth and detail until you get to a more complex finished model. You also add color to that, add textures, you shade it, and then you can use that in anything bigger. You can use, so 3D modeling is just one part of working with 3D. There are all kinds of different applications for it. Anything from making animations, videos, to making your own video games. If you're in like engineering or such, then you're going to end up using CAD software, which is like 3D modeling but with more math, and it's a little bit more boring. So you use in visual effects if you're making some kind of movie. You use it in order to make everything actually look realistic. Even in science, there are different forms of simulation you can do using 3D. That way you don't have to actually collide cars together. You can do that virtually. And then you can figure out how different forces are applied on the driver. So yeah, so with 3D, you just have a lot more freedom. But at the core, you need to first learn like the basic mechanics of how it works and why you should use it and how to use it. So again, we're using Blender, the Blender software. You can get it from blender.org. Yeah, 2.83 or a newer version is what works for this. Yeah, so you can get it from there. I'm just, yeah. Yeah, so it's completely free. You just go to, 1 second. Okay, so you just simply go to blender.org. Right here, you've got a download link. If you're on another platform, you can just head to the downloads page and it'll give you options. There are also these experimental branches, but that's for more advanced users. So they've got plenty of different versions. And as I think I might have mentioned, this is an open source software. That means you can view the source code and you can improve it, and that's what makes it so great. You know, multiple people working on it in their free time, improving the software. Yeah. And now it's actually being used in professional applications. So once you download Blender, it's pretty simple to run it. You simply just, after you either install it or you get the zip file. So when you run it, the first thing you're greeted by is all of these buttons. There's this screen. It's a lot of buttons. It can be intimidating, but it's not. You need to just go step by step, because if you try and press every button at the same time, it's going to be overwhelming because this is an advanced software. But again, it's important to take it step by step, go through each of these applications and functionality individually instead of all at once. That way you are not going to end up like doing one thing for a little bit or not another thing for a little bit. That way you master each part of the software completely. Any questions so far before I just explain some of the basics of interface? Okay, so this right here is, but this is just the default view in Blender. So this box right here is referred to at this entire box right here is referred to as 3D view. So the 3D view is where you spend almost all of your time in Blender. That's why the default view is so big. You end up moving around, you make your objects, you model them, you make animations. This all happens inside of this box. It's called a 3D view. So if you want, you can write that down. I'll also post the actual material so you can look at that. But just know that this is called a 3D view. On the side here, this is the sidebar. There are some options here. Most of these options you can access with hotkeys, and hotkeys is something I'll cover in a minute. But the 3D view has these buttons on the side, buttons on the top, and each of these has their own function. They're grouped based on how often they're used. For example, these buttons right here on, so okay, so these buttons right here on the left, they are very commonly used. This one here, if you roll over it, it's going to give you this little tooltip, and it's often really useful to just, if you don't know what something does, just go over the tooltip, because they always have these little explanations. Right now in this default view, there are only a couple of different tools here, but in other views, you might have a lot. So in Blender, there are typically multiple ways to do one thing. That's because it's designed not just for advanced users, but that's because it's not just designed for novice users, but also advanced ones. When you're trying to do any one function, you don't have to go through and scroll through every single menu. Often for all of these buttons, there is a really quick hotkey you can press. So that's something to remember. Almost every function, there's a hotkey for it. And those hotkeys are just going to make it significantly faster and easier to model things quickly. These little arrows at the edges, at the edge of this 3D view, these are pop-out menus. And if you click on them, they'll pop out this little menu. These ones are just to hide these extra functions. All of these are related somewhat to the 3D view, but they're not really necessary, which is why they're hidden in this little pop-out. So sometimes you might need to look in here for some functions. Most of the time, you'll just leave it locked into the back. So these little buttons right here are for orbiting around the view. So these are all for navigation. These ones up top, above these navigation buttons, are for shading. So there are different types of shading. This is 3D, and not everyone has like a monster computer. So it's often useful to do all of your modeling and texturing and prototyping in a really low resolution without any textures, without any complex stuff going on, in like a low resolution kind of version of the 3D view. And then once you're done with it, once you want to make a final product, that's going to happen in one of these higher shaded views. It's going to render it out. So all of these are for shading. These ones up top. So these options up top here are for snapping and therefore transform and other things. So essentially, these are for more advanced modeling where you're trying to place things in a specific position. Usually, you'll never touch this unless you're dealing with really specific instances. The most important one of these is it is this one right here, and this is the snap. This is snap tool. And inside of here, you'll find a whole bunch of different options. I'll go over them later, but it's good to remember the name for this. So I covered all of these random buttons, but then there are these. These are the most important. And up here are the drop-down menus. So if you need to find a specific function related to something specific, you look here. So this is the 3D view, and in the 3D view, up here, you have drop-down menus. You have view, select, add, and object. So object has things that are related to each object in a scene. Add has things related to adding objects. View has things related to how you're looking in the 3D view, how things look, how you can adjust that. And then finally over here, this drop-down menu right here is for switching modes. So right now we're in object mode, and whenever you start, it's going to default, it's going to be in object mode by default. So you need to remember that. You don't start out in your editing mode. You start out in object mode. And in object mode, you can switch, you can move objects around, but you cannot edit them individually. So these are the different buttons in the 3D view. You're going to be using the 3D view most of the time whenever you're modeling, whenever you're designing anything. So it's good to know where everything is. So it's a good idea to just go through some of these menus sometime and just look through for different functions, just to familiarize yourself with it. So in this 3D space, in order to look around and move around, if you don't have a mouse or you just like this better, there's this little widget here, and this is in these, along with these navigation buttons. And yeah, just to recap, these are for navigation. These are for shading. These are for commonly used functions. So all of these have a hotkey. And then these right here are for the drop-down menus. So those are the four main areas where you're going to find functions. So if you want to look around this 3D space, there's this widget here. And what the widget lets you do is orbit around the object, orbit around this center. It's pretty simple. You can also orbit using the middle mouse button on your mouse if you have a mouse. If you press down on the scroll wheel, you can look around. You can also scroll. You can also zoom in and out by using the scroll wheel or using this magnifying glass also on these navigation widget things. There's also this hand tool that's for panning. So if you want to look at this camera over here, you can't orbit over there. You're gonna have to pan over. So orbiting is middle mouse button on your mouse. To pan on your mouse, you hold down Shift and press the middle mouse button. Or you can just use these widgets. So in order to get anywhere in this 3D view, you use a combination of orbiting and panning. So you can just look around to anywhere in this infinite grid space thing. So that's for navigation in 3D view, but sometimes it might take a lot of effort and time when you're switching over here and looking and trying to align and look at this light and then switch over here, and that takes some time. So there is a set of tools. There's a little pie menu that you can pop up if you press the tilde key. And this is an example of one of those hotkeys. You can use it to access all of these common functions. So you can look at the top, the bottom, left, look at a specific object. So that's how to look around 3D view. So if you want to select a different object, for example, in this default scene, there are 3 different objects. 1 second. So in this default scene, there are 3 different objects. There is this camera, this little lamp, and then this cube. So right now we have this cube selected since it's got this little orange outline. So I'm going to select this little lamp here, this light, and then to switch to it, you can either pan over there and orbit around it to look at it, or you can use this pie menu again. If you hit tilde, you can use view selected. And that's often a faster way to work, because when you're dealing with big scenes, when you've got lots of objects, when you've got, like, for example, if you made an entire park and there are tons of different trees in there, and you want to get to a specific one on the other side of the scene, you usually would have to like pan all the way over somewhere else. And that's going to take a lot of time and effort. So that's why these exist. Tilde is right next to the 1 key, and it just pops this menu up. And you just press it, and then you can go view selected. You can select the lamp over here, view selected, this thing, like that. So it's generally a faster way to work than just panning. If you want to, yeah. So again, selecting an object is with the left mouse button. You just click on another object to select it. If you right click on an object, you get this little menu with some commonly used functions. I will go over that later, but you can generally use the right click menu just to quickly access some of these things. So, right, any questions so far on the 3D view or how to navigate? Okay, so like I said before in the presentation, everything in 3D is made out of vertices, edges, and faces. So that was just navigation, but how do you actually edit these objects? So like I said before, in these drop-down menus, there's this thing right here called this modes button. And if you click on it, you get all of these different modes. And the most important one right now is edit mode. So you can go here, click on it, and you enter edit mode. You can also just press tab, and tab will go in and out of object mode. So if you go into edit mode, you can actually see all of the different vertices that make up this cube. And in edit mode is where you edit things, edit all objects, move faces around, move vertices around. So you'll notice that all of these new buttons just popped up. So you'll notice that in the future, in all different tool sets that you use, all different modes, there's a different set of these sidebar options that are easily accessible. For example, so it still has this first set of ones that were still there in object mode, but now there's all of these new ones. So I'm going to switch back to object mode. So right now there's only a cube to add an object. So you might have seen this, but there's this little add menu in the drop-down section. And in this add menu, you can add all kinds of objects. So I'm going to go over some of the basic types of objects. You've got a mesh. A mesh is typically your like actual solid object, what you drop on the floor, what you move around. The lamp is, so yeah, if you're making a phone, that's going to be a mesh. If you're making a bus, that's going to be a mesh. So meshes are what make up the solid objects in the scene. You've also got curves, and curves are typically, they have specific use cases, but they're mostly for making like pipes and things. You don't use them too much, but they exist. There are these surfaces. Typically, you don't use these because they have very specific use cases. So there are these metaballs, and these are used to make organic objects. They're kind of like gooey, almost. They sort of combine with each other like goo. There's this text object. Text object, you can actually add text into your scene. You have this volume object, but you don't really use that unless you're going into simulation and stuff. Grease pencil, you also don't use unless you're trying to do 2D animation in Blender, and that's another topic that you have to cover in detail. Armatures, we'll cover that later. Empties are really important. So in 3D, sometimes you're going to want to have like a dummy object, just something that's invisible that you're looking at or orbiting around. So empties are a way to do that. They're kind of like meshes, except they don't have any vertices. They're just sort of an object. They're just like an invisible ghost object. So, and then you've got lights, and lights are how you light up a scene. You're going to need at least some kind of light in every single scene, because without a light, it's just going to be darkness. You can't see anything. So there's a couple of different types of lights. You've got point lamps, sun lamps, spot lamps, and so on. And then you've got speakers. That's for if you want to add like audio in your scene. We're not going to use that too much, but anyways. So you can add an object through this menu up here. And if you go to mesh, you can then add any kind of mesh. I'll add in a sphere. And right now the sphere is inside the cube. So we want to move the object. So to move an object, up here on the left, you have this sidebar again. And you can use any of these functions here to move it. So there's this move tool, and it pops up with this little widget. There's a rotate tool, and that lets you rotate it. And then there's this scale tool. And then there's also this one, which is just everything all at the same time. If you somehow just like, I don't know. But you can use the move tool, the move widget, and just move it along this. So you'll notice that there are 3 different arrows, and that's because there are 3 different dimensions, because it's 3D. So there's X, which is red, Y, which is green here, and Z, which is blue. Those are just sort of arbitrary colors, well, RGB, but these just represent the different orientations. So since all of these, I mentioned before that all of these functions on the sidebar, they have hotkeys for them. So for this cube, for the sphere, sorry, you can press G, and that's going to grab it and use grab to move an object around the scene. While in this grab mode, you just press it once, and then you got this stuck to your cursor. And you can press X, Y, or Z, and then it locks it to one of these. So that's a pretty fast way to move objects relatively precisely around the scene. It's pretty easy to do. If you right-click it, so if you grab this object and then you right-click, that will cancel it. If you grab it and then you left-click, that will confirm it. So you can use it to maybe move this over here and move it up a little bit. And to snap it to any one of these axes, you just press the corresponding button. So X to snap it to the X, Y for the Y, Z for snapping it to the Z axis, and so that's for moving an object around the scene. It's a good idea to just get used to these different shortcuts, because that way you don't have to rely on using these arrows to move something all around a scene. It just ends up being faster to directly use the hotkeys. So it's G for grab. So you've got G for grab, and then you've got one more, and this is R for rotate. So you can rotate any object in the scene the same way. You just press R once, the same way you press G once. Right click cancels it. Left click will confirm it. Control Z undoes. So you can rotate the same way around only the X, only the Y by pressing that, and only the Z by pressing that key. So there's one more, and that is scale. So scaling an object affects how large it is, and you can scale it by pressing S. The same way you use rotate or grab, you just press S once, right click cancels, left click confirms, and you have the same tricks. You can press X to scale along the X, Y to scale along the Y, and then Z to scale along the Z only. Right click to cancel, and you can use these three tools to just make up objects out of these shapes and meshes. These basic meshes, they're called primitives. So that's, I guess, a vocabulary word. So you use these and then you model them to make them complex objects. So you'll notice that this sphere, it looks a lot more pixely than this cube. And if we go to edit mode, which again is tab, so tab to enter edit mode, you'll notice that there are 8 vertices on this cube. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But on this sphere, there are way more. There are, I think, 482 on this one sphere. And that's because the sphere is round, it's not flat, so you're going to need a lot more faces to get that sort of round shape. So that's why you can't just use the sphere for everything. You don't want to use too many complex objects in a scene, because the more you add, the more time it will take, unless you have a really good computer again. Generally, it's actually easier to work on simpler models like this that only have 8 vertices rather than these complex models. So whenever possible, you want, I'll go into the details of modeling in the next one, but when you want to make any object, it's good to remember to always stay as simple as you can. That way you don't end up getting these super advanced ones that you end up having to have a really good computer to just render. So again, you have grab, rotate, scale, and these all work in edit mode as well. So I'm going to go into edit mode in more detail next time, but if you enter edit mode, you can select any one of these vertices the same way. You can select one, grab it, move it around, right click to cancel, left click to confirm, and it'll move it around. You can select multiple objects in object mode and edit mode by holding down shift. So if I can select both of these and move them together. And the same goes for edit mode. I can select 1, 2, 3, 4, and these will all move at the same time. You can lock it to the X, Y, Z, same way. But on an object such as this sphere, there are just so many different vertices that it's going to end up taking a lot of time if you want to, like, I don't know, make it into a smiley face, something like that. So I'm just going to hit cancel, Control Z. So if you want to, yeah, so there are 3 different modes here, and I'm going to cover these in more detail. But vertex select, edge select, and then face select. So vertex select, you select each of the individual vertices. Edge select, you select edges. And then face select, you select entire faces like this, and you can move them. So those are the 3 types of modes in edit mode. It's good to remember those. Again, I'll go into more detail on that. But so for today, the assignment is to download and install Blender and show that you've so right now the assignment is download, install Blender, and send a picture or something, just show that you have successfully installed it. If you want, you can then you need to familiarize yourself with moving around 3D view and adding objects. So yeah, and I'm also going to, so 1 second. So I'm going to post in the WhatsApp group, kind of like a cheat sheet. And what that's going to have is all of the basic functions and hotkeys. That way you don't need to remember all the different keys that you press in order to do every single function. You can just press it right away. So I'm just going to send that in the WhatsApp. So, and I'll also post a link to that. A link to that in the Zoom meeting and on the WhatsApp. If you, yeah, so that's where it's going to go. 1 second. So yeah, your assignment right now is just to download and install Blender, and I guess show that you have installed it. There's going to be a short quiz on it, on just the basic navigation and things at the end of it, and that's going to be homework. So you just finish that quiz as homework. This right here is the cheat sheet, and you can refer to that whenever you have trouble remembering what the actual button for anything is. Yeah, so if you don't know where the button for grab is, you just go to that sheet, you look through everything, and then you find out what it is. Okay. Awesome. So okay, so yeah, so the assignment right now is just get it and I guess send a picture or something, show that you have. I see some people have already. So after that, once you're done with installing it, and then after you've gotten a hang of the interface, we have about 15 minutes left. So the the assignment is going to be to make sorry, 1 second. So the assignment is to make a sorry, okay, there we go. A car. So it doesn't have to be a good car, and we're going to be making a slightly better car at the end. So this is going to be an example. So it's the challenge or assignment, I guess, right now is to make a car just using cubes, using any of these objects that you add. You can make wheels however you want. So use the 3 main functions: scaling, S, rotating, grabbing, and you can add as many objects as you want and just make some kind of car. And once you're done with that, you can send the picture to the WhatsApp group or send it to me, I guess. If you have any questions on today's anything, feel free to ask. So yeah, so does anyone have any questions on anything today?
What do you prefer? Like, does it matter if, or like, are there some features only available for a Linux or Windows version, etc.?
So that's an interesting question. So generally, everything functions almost identically across different versions. When it comes to actual features, a lot of Blender's developers do use Linux and Mac OS, so they're going to get the same versions and features. How well Blender does benefit from having a somewhat decent computer. Some people also say that Linux or Windows might be slightly faster, but for the most part, all of the features and functionality are the same across different versions. Yeah. It's actually a pretty small file size overall across versions, because some of the other different softwares and competitors to Blender, they're like 20, 200 gigs just for a simple modeling program. So yeah, all of the features and functionality are the same. You might have, I guess, you might have like a different issue if you're on one version versus another. So I guess if you do have problems, let me know. I have like a Linux thing I can just spin up and check it out, I guess. So yeah. So if you do have any issues running on different versions, let me know. But as far as I know, all of the features unfortunately are the same. Any other questions?
Thank you for that.
So the assignment right now until 4:30 is just to model a simple car using any of the meshes, and then just post an image of that to the WhatsApp group. There's going to be, for homework, there's going to be just a short quiz on some of the basic navigation, some of the names and things. So yeah, so if you need to so it's going to have some questions such as like what's the name of the main area that you're modeling in, and that's going to be very easy. So yeah, I just gave you an answer to the first one, but yeah, that's what's going to be on the homework. Yeah, so I guess if you have any issues setting it up and stuff, you can ask. So yeah. So while you guys are working on car or whatever for the car just made out of meshes and primitives for classwork, I guess I'll cover some of edit mode functions. So, yeah, I think I'll just cover some of the different areas, because edit mode, I think I can cover in more detail. So, as I mentioned before, this main area is the 3D view. I went into some detail on those. Some other things to keep in mind and remember is this sidebar, this entire side panel here. It contains a lot of useful things. For example, this main square here is referred to as the outliner. And what the outliner has is all of the objects in the scene. It just lays them out like this and lets you look at and select any one of them. And it's really useful because sometimes you'll have a scene where you have like 100 different objects and you want to find a specific one. You can just search it up in this one and then select it. That way, if you've got like, I don't know, for some reason you wanted to make a field of grass and that each grass is separate for some reason. I'm actually going to, there are ways to make that faster, but if you've got a lot of different objects in the scene, I need to find one, then this outliner is the way to go. That way you don't need to dig through a scene looking for a specific object. Down here is called the properties panel, and this is just as important. The properties panel holds all of the information and like the settings and everything for most of Blender. So these top options up here are going to deal with your scene and the world and like the lighting overall as a whole. And then these bottom ones are going to be specific to the object. So this green one right here popped up because I have this light selected. And what that gives you all, if you click on any one of these buttons, it'll switch to this tab. So since I selected a light, it gave me another new tab with some light options. If I select the camera, now there's a new camera tab with camera specific options. And then if I select a mesh, it'll give me some mesh specific options. All objects have these other tabs as well. Each one has its own function. For now, the one you start out in is this object properties panel. And what the object properties panel is, it sort of takes whatever's in the scene, whatever you're looking at, whatever you moved, and it just expresses it with numbers. So this lamp right here, it gives you the exact X, Y, and Z location. It gives you its exact rotation. It gives you its exact scale. It gives you all of the data about any specific object. So if you need to move something precisely 1 meter to the left, you would use this properties panel rather than using grab and moving it around. It might just be easier to use this properties panel and just say 1 meter, and then it moves exactly that far. So it's a good idea to try out using this properties panel in this object properties tab. Each one has tons of different extra options. So when it comes to the properties panel, you want to take it again 1 step at a time. You don't want to go through all of these different menus and press 100 different things. For example, we're not going to get into particles and simulation until later on. So unless you're just messing around, you might want to learn a bit how these work before just using them. Or you can use them and then learn on the way, but it's generally easier to learn first. So in the object properties panel, you've got the name, you've got the location, rotation, scale, all the different parts of it. So you've got properties panel, the outliner, 3D view, and then one more down here is the timeline. And well, the timeline just goes through time. Use this for animations. So we're not going to be using it immediately, but again, it's good to know what each of these panels are called. That way, if you're looking up something specific for these, you know exactly what their name is. You're not going to be looking up how to fix thingy on the bottom. You know, you're going to search up, all right, I need to know how to move the time rather than just, So it's good to learn and understand the names behind each of these different panels. So yeah. Any questions so far on this panels or anything?
So this is an earlier question as I'm trying it out now, but when you select the vertices, how do you actually move them?
Okay, so when you use the same hotkeys and everything in edit mode, so use grab. So use the same G, R to rotate, or S to scale as you do in object mode. You can also use these widgets on the left again to move one in a specific direction, like that. Does that answer your question? Does that make sense, or am I being confusing?
Oh, sorry, I didn't notice I was muted, but yeah, I'm getting the idea of it now. Thank you.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So if you try to rotate a singular vertex, that's not going to do anything since it's just a vertex. So yeah. So rotating and scaling only is going to work if you got multiple vertices selected. Yeah. So any other questions? All right. So then I guess we can wrap up. So again, just make that car, post a picture of it to WhatsApp. I'll also post the homework on there in a few minutes. So yeah, you can also refer to that cheat sheet.
And you wanted us to post the car by 4:30, correct?
I mean, it is 4:30 right now. Just post it whenever you're done with it.
All right. And that's like sort of our homework as well as the quiz.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Just keep it plain binders, not gonna help.